Hey everybody, I'm Scott Stanton, the original Tombstone tourist, and today we're in Yeadon, Pennsylvania, just a stone's throw from Philly, and we are at Holy Cross Cemetery, 225 acres, over 150,000 burials, including sports figures, statesmen, serial killers, musicians, and the mob, specifically the Philly crime family. Now today, rather than highlighting a single mob figure and talking about them and showing their grave, I'm going to take you on a tour of the whole cemetery only for the mob from the 1900s to the 1980s. That way, I can get all my mispronunciations and all my factual errors into a single efficient film. Ready? Let's talk about this gentleman here, Mr. Michael Maggio. Now, Michael Maggio, if you're from the Philly area or anywhere on the East Coast, you know who Maggio Cheese is, and that is right. Michael Maggio founded with his brother Maggio Cheese Company, which is in business still today. Now, Mr. Maggio was very well known, he was very wealthy, he was very well respected because of the cheese company, but guess what? He had a dark side. He was one of the original OGs, original gangsters of the Philly crime family. Now, he ran a group called the Greaser Gang, and he did all the mob stuff you normally do, like loan sharking, assault and battery, armed robbery, things fall off a truck and they accidentally get stolen, all that great stuff. However, he also did murder. And there is not a lot of record of who he murdered, but I do know for sure two of them. That was his wife and his son. Yes, he murdered his wife and his son. Let me tell you how. He used to work from here and he had a vacation home on the lakes in New Jersey. He suspected there was something going on with his second wife and his son from his first marriage. And he was right. So he hid out in the garden shed. He waited till midnight. He caught them both in bed, and he shot her 5 times and he shot him twice, both dead on sight, and then he went on the run. He was caught, he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 5.5 years in prison, and I believe that is the only time he ever went to jail. Now, the funny thing, not so funny about this, is when you read the actual police report, it says they were both found naked with gunshots and he was wearing dark socks. And for some reason, I can't get that image out of my brain. Anyway, so Michael went on in about his mid-60s. He started to get into failing health, and he did the one thing that he's probably most well known for, and that is he recruited a very young Angelo Bruno, who we will be talking about in a few minutes. Angelo Bruno became a very solid earner for the family, very loyal, very Italian, and that continued with the Philly crime family. Now what we're gonna do here, he's in section 38, right off the gate of Bailey Road, and it's Michael Maggio and his family. Now we're gonna go to a salesman that used to work for Michael Maggio. Okay, so we just came from Michael Maggio's mausoleum, and we are now in section 39, just one over, right off Bailey Road, and we are 4 spaces in, 4 spaces from the corner, and we have here Antonio Polina. Now, Antonio Polina was a high-level mobster within the Philadelphia crime family. He worked under Michael Maggio, and he was a salesman at his cheese company, like I said. But he was really more interested in such things as murder, assault, robbery, bootlegging, loan sharking, all of that stuff. In fact, he had a huge loan shark operation for a number of years, and he really wanted to be mob boss. The commission, which is made up of the heads of all the families, didn't really care for Mr. Polina here. But they made him interim mob boss of the Philadelphia crime family. And one of his first orders was to go to his underboss, Ignacio Denaro, and say, I need you to put a hit on my rival, who could possibly be the Don, and that was Angelo Bruno. But he did it without the permission of the commission. Mr. Denaro knew that, so he went to Mr. Bruno, and he said, by the way, there's a hit on you. Angelo Bruno went to the commission and said, hey, did you know there's a hit on me? And they said, no, you are now the boss. In fact, you're the boss, and you can take out Mr. Antonio Polina. And what did he do? Well, normally in mob lore, they would automatically take out their rival. He would be dead. That'd be the end of it. But Angelo Bruno became known as the Gentle Don, and he went to Polina and said, look, I don't need to start a war. You already have your crew, and they're doing great work. I'm going to let you continue, and I'm going to let you keep your life. And sure enough, Angelo lived to the ripe age of 100. And he died of natural causes, which I believe puts him in the record book of a mobster who died at over age of 100 of natural causes. So again, we're in section 39, right around the corner from Mr. Maggio. And now we're gonna go see Angelo Bruno, one of the critical and major players in the Philadelphia crime family. Okay, welcome to section 23, and this is Angelo Bruno, and he is what is considered really kind of the start of the mafia dons, or the head of the mafia, the Philadelphia crime family. He was also known as the Gentle Don, but don't let that fool you. He had quite a high body count under his 20 plus years of service as the head of the family. Now, Angelo Bruno was very good friends with Carlo Gambino of the New York crime family. They got along very well, so he was always very well protected. And the reason that you should be concerned that he was protected was he was a very conservative Don. Even the FBI said, he doesn't make a lot of noise, why would we investigate him? They had their hands full with the 5 crime families in New York City. But he kept a very low profile, and that was part of his success. He did all the great stuff that mobsters do, had a really successful loan sharking operation, but what he wouldn't do is drugs and the sex trade, including prostitution and things like that. That was his downfall. His team was not making enough money without the drugs that were flowing from New York City. And what made them really angry is because Carlo was operating in their territory. Angelo Bruno was collecting his share of the profits, but not his guys and their crew. So what had happened was his consigliere, his very own consigliere, Antonio Capernegro, orchestrated a hit on Angelo Bruno. And as he was sitting in his car outside his residence, he was shot in the back of the neck. And it was one of the top 5 mob hits of all time. You've probably seen that picture I just showed you. Once again, the commission was not apprised of this, and Antonio Capernegro went to New York City shortly after the hit, thinking he was going to be installed as the new Don. And instead, they took him down in the basement, and they tortured him, and they beat him unmercifully and shot him numerous times. And they also shot and killed, in very short order, 3 other of his associates that were also with the Angelo Bruno family. And he was found in a parked car completely naked with dollar bills stuffed in every orifice, and that was a mob signal to say he died from greed. So after Angelo was murdered, the whole thing went to hell in a handbasket, basically. Over the next 25 years, over 25 mob associates, made men, crew leaders, underbosses of several local crime families were all murdered in a very short period of time, about 10 years. It was a very, very violent part of South Philly's history. And so what we're going to do is now we're going to go over to Philip Testa, because Philip Testa took over where Angelo Bruno left off. Okay, so if you go to section 21, right around the corner from Angelo Bruno, and look for that huge Bartholomew monument, right behind is Mr. Philip Testa and his son, Salvador. Now, Philip Testa was made the head of the Philadelphia crime family right after the assassination of Angelo Bruno. Now, I'd love to tell you all the great things that Philip Testa did as head of the family, but he was murdered, assassinated once again, just 1 year after he took over the reins of the family. Now, what had happened was he came home, he put the key in the lock of his door, and the entire front part of the house blew up. Now, what had happened was his very own underboss, Peter Casella, and his capo regime, Frank Narducci Sr., conspired to murder the boss. Now, here's why they did it. In addition to the drug trade, Atlantic City was now coming into its own, and there was labor unions, there was gambling, there was construction contracts. All of that money was going to other families. They were simply not in a position or desire, because of Angelo Bruno, to go after that along with the drug trade. So, once again, because they're not too bright, Peter Casella and Frank Narducci Sr. took it upon themselves to take out Phil Testa with the help of Rocco Marinucci. Now, Rocco was known as Boom Boom, and he built the actual bomb, and so there was 3 of them. There was a 4th gentleman. He went in the witness protection program right after he testified about these 3 guys and hadn't been seen since. Now, what happened to these gentlemen? Enter Salvador, his son. Now, Salvador, known as Salvi, was crowned or labeled the Crown Prince of Philly mob. And he was a good-looking kid, young, a go-getter. In fact, he didn't even join the mob initially. He went to school at Temple University for a year. Then I believe he got his real estate license and went into the real estate business for a little bit until his father's assassination, and then he became underboss, and then he worked for Little Nicky Scarfo. Now, Little Nicky Scarfo became the head of the crime family when Testa was murdered. Philip Testa was murdered. And Little Nicky gave permission to Salvador and said, you can do whatever you want to the people responsible for killing your father. What did Peter Casella do? He heard about it, he fled to Florida, and he lived with his daughter, and he died of old age, and nobody found him until after his death. Frank Narducci Sr. was not so lucky. Frank Narducci was coming home one day, and Salvador and his crew were waiting for him, and Salvador called out his name, "Hey Frank." He turned around, and just long enough for Frank to make eye contact, shot him in the head, and then shot him 9 to 10 more times in the chest area. He was dead when he hit the street. So, shortly after that, Salvador took aside his 2 sons and said, I've lost my father, and yes, I killed your father, and this is where it ends now. So Frank Narducci Jr. became part of Salvador Testa's family or group. And what they did is 1 year after the killing of Philip, they found Rocco Marinucci and Frank and the Grande brothers took him over to the Buckeye Club into the basement and brutally tortured and murdered him. Contrary to belief, Salvador set it up, but he was not there. He did not do the hit himself. And what did they leave with him? They left 3 firecrackers in his mouth. Now, a lot of people say that was to say, to show the world, hey, you died because of your explosive. Actually, they were going to torture him with those firecrackers when he was alive, but they couldn't get him lit because there was so much blood and spit when they were torturing him. So they just stuffed his mouth full of firecrackers, and he was left in a field, I believe, on Federal Parkway. Sadly, a couple of years later, at age 28 or 29, Salvador was murdered by none other than Little Nicky Scarfo, because Little Nicky Scarfo was a psychopath. He ended up killing over 15 members of his own family. He had a Napoleon complex, he was a psychopath, he was a narcissist, he was the worst of worst mob bosses, and the big chunk of that Philly violence was due to Little Nicky Scarfo. So we've got a couple more to show you. I'll see you in the next one. Okay, we're in section 18, and it's in the far corner of the cemetery. And here we have Rocco Marinucci, also known as Rocco Boom Boom. But you know, if you're going to give out mob names, I always thought he'd be known as the Pizza Man, Rocco the Pizza Man, because he owned Pop's Pizza in South Philly in the 1970s and early 80s. Now, Rocco was a driver for Peter Casella, the underboss to Phil Testa. And if you remember, Peter Casella was the one who orchestrated with Frank Narducci Sr. the murder of Phil Testa after he was only mob boss for a year. Why do they bring Rocco in on this? Now, Rocco's not a made guy. He is just an associate, but he had wicked bomb making skills, and that's what he did. He made the bomb that blew up all of Phil Testa's front part of his house. And, you know, these guys are not that bright. First of all, Peter Casella and Frank Narducci Sr., they did this assassination without the commission's consent. So what do you think's going to happen? I mean, if anybody watches Goodfellow, we know the one thing we learned from that movie was you don't kill a made guy. You certainly don't kill a mob boss without permission. He went along with it because he wanted to be a made guy. He wanted to be part of the team. And so he parked his pizza truck real close to the house. It was a black pizza truck with his name on it. And he detonated the bomb right when Philip Testa went up to the house onto the porch. Now, this bomb went off. The whole block came outside. They saw him drive away. Like I said, these people aren't the brightest. And Salvador, Phil Testa's brother, or son, was given permission by Nicky Scarfo to go ahead and take care of everybody, and he saved Rocco for last. He was the one who orchestrated the hit on Rocco. They tortured and beat him. Salvi was not involved in it. It was Frank Narducci Jr. and the Grande brothers. They tortured him, and they left firecrackers in his mouth to show that you know, you died using your explosives. Now, actually, what they wanted to do was put firecrackers in his mouth and torture him until he was dead. But they couldn't light the firecrackers because of all the saliva and blood. So they left him in his mouth for him to be found that way. Now, don't feel bad for Rocco, okay? Rocco was a vicious killer. He actually killed two of his neighbors, two young kids, for playing their music too loud. So don't feel sorry for him. But follow me, I've got one more to show you, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Hey everybody, if you have stuck through me, we're at our final stop, and I really appreciate it if you made it all the way through this video. If you want all the mob lore, interviews, videos, crime scene photos, all that great information about these mobsters and dozens more across the US, come to our website, thetombstonetourist.com, and you'll have everything you could ever want for mob lore. Now, we are at our final stop, and we're at Blessed Mother Mausoleum, and we're on the far left structure. I think it's like 3 or 4 mausoleums, and we're on the upper road. Now, if you've seen the movie The Irishman, It's a really nice movie by Martin Scorsese. He does a great job on mob movies, but it is painfully inaccurate. It's probably 80% fictionalized, and that is because it is the story of Frank Sheeran. This is our final stop. Now, Frank the Irishman Sheeran was associated with the mob, but he was an Irishman, so he couldn't be a made guy with the Italian families. And he claimed to have killed 25 to 30 people. What's the problem with that? Well, first of all, the FBI cannot confirm a single one of those alleged hits. I do believe he did do 2 hits for Angelo Bruno, because that came from Angelo's crew, that, you know, they hinted that he had done a couple of jobs for him. But other than that, there's no truth to that. Second of all, he claims to have killed Jimmy Hoffa. Okay, get in line. 14 people have claimed on their deathbeds to have killed Jimmy Hoffa. He's just the 15th. In fact, one of the associates from one of the Italian families, I love this quote. He said, "The only thing Frank killed was a bottle of red wine." Another one said, and these are his words, "Why would we hire an Irish Mick when I have a whole family of Italians in my own crew, and they'll do it for free?" Which makes a lot of sense. Okay, this mythology of you hire a hitman, any hitman, and pay him $100,000, that just doesn't really exist, because there's no loyalty. And a lot of outside hitmen end up dead themselves after they do the job, because there's no loyalty to the family. So the hits always came from in their own family. Now, why did he potentially lie? Why was there so many inaccuracies in the book and the movie? Well, Frank was on his deathbed. He had 3 daughters, and to sell books, you got to be sensational. Nobody's going to care that you worked with labor leaders, and he did work with all the big guys, but he didn't really do much. He wasn't that exciting, so he had to beef up the book a bit. And so there you have it. If you like the movie, great. That's what it should be, for entertainment. But I'm going to let Karen, who's done this entire video, thank you very much, Karen. She's going to take you to Frank inside the mausoleum. Until then, have a great day. Thank you.